Another Murdock Music Minute and another episode of Getting Into. Here I discuss or suggest 5 albums of a band or an artist that I think are a good introduction for newbies, for starters. So this is a sort of primer video, or as I call it, a Getting Into list. And today I've chosen a more modern band formed in 1992, Stereophonics from Wales. For some, this band represented a bit of a ray of light in terms of rock music in recent times. For others, the Stereophonics might be the very best example of mediocrity in modern rock music. I quite enjoyed their albums for a while and then lost a bit track of this band, but they've just released, or a couple of months ago, they released a new album, Make 'em Laugh, Make 'em Wait, Make 'em Cry. Not the first time their album title is a bit of a mouthful. And that made me remember this band, look back at their albums. And so I thought, why not do a Getting Into episode about a more recent band, Stereophonics. As mentioned, they formed in the early 90s in a little Welsh village called, I can only mispronounce that, Cwmaman. There's no chance. Maybe Welsh speakers can help me with the pronunciation in the comments. All guys from the same little place, the same little village. Stuart Cable, the first original drummer. Kelly Jones, guitar and vocals, and also the main songwriter. And finally, after trying out various bassists and for a short time even working with the second guitarist, Richard Jones, who's not related to Kelly Jones, joined the band that operated for the longest time, or at least in the first period, as a trio. Most of their influences came from classic rock bands of the 70s. You hear a little bit of maybe Aerosmith riffing in some of their songs, but most of all, also in terms of Kelly Jones's vocal approach, Rod Stewart and the band Bad Company. So we are talking about a heavier, bluesy rock style here. But of course, this being a band from the early 90s, also a little bit of grunge and, of course, the Britpop vibe crept into their music, and they all blended this into a kind of modern Brit rock sound on their early albums. They came out as a quite hungry, urgent trio, especially on their first 2 albums, with energetic, direct, not too complicated, guitar-driven songs. They first performed under the band name Tragic Love Company, but when they were approached by 2 producers after a gig who suggested they would like to work with them, they decided to change their name, or actually were urged by those 2 producers to change the band name. Stuart Cable found the term stereophonic on an old record player, I believe, and hence the band name Stereophonics came into being, which personally I find a lot better than Tragic Love Company. So the trio recorded a first demo, and that finally led to a record deal with the very new V2 label. I believe that Stereophonics more or less even were the first band to appear on this new label, and they released their debut album, Word Gets Around, and they released their debut album in 1997, my first entry on the Getting Into Stereophonics list for newbies, Word Gets Around. For fans of Britpop, or even also for fans of a more straightforward rock sound, this was a breath of fresh air. in the musical landscape of the second half of the 90s. The big Britpop bands were on a slow decline. Oasis, for example, or Blur were changing directions, moving into a more artsy sound. Radiohead were the new rage, but that was a bit too cerebral and too depressive for some listeners. So this debut album by Stereophonics was a great dose of fun, a kind of no-nonsense pop rock sound for the 90s. It's filled with catchy, energetic, electric guitar-driven tunes that you can sing along to or stomp along to, all of course dominated by Kelly Jones's raspy voice that always sounds like a good fun night in the pub with lots of whiskey. And practically all of the songs on here are quite memorable. They are somewhere between indie rock and a more classic rock sound with a 1990s production. But it sounds quite organic, quite dry and direct. As mentioned, the album opens with a little anthem by the band 1,000 Trees. Yeah, this is a great wake-up call or opening track also for rocking the clubs or opening your live set with. More Life in a Tramp's Vest is more kind of a stomping pub rocker. Local Boy in the Photograph is also one of their early hits, or at least fan favorites. A lot of the songs from this album have become fan favorites and are still played to this day by the band. Check My Eyelids for Holes shows the band in a bit of a noisier, grittier mode. And the closing track, Billy Davies' Daughter, is actually a quite sad, heartfelt, moody ballad. And on the whole, the songs on this album come across sometimes as a kind of grittier version of Oasis around the time of their debut album, Definitely Maybe. But as mentioned, some indie rock and some classic 70s rock elements added. Also, the lyrics by Kelly Jones on this album are quite strong, more observant, like snippets from a local newspaper and possibly autobiographical experiences in growing up in a small town. This debut certainly raised hopes for this new band from Wales in circles of rock fans, of indie fans, and also of Britpop fans. And the band delivered with their second album, also my choice number 2 on the Getting Into list, Performance and Cocktails. You can hear that at this point they were even more sure of themselves as a band, as songwriters. Stylistically, they open up a bit or broaden the style, but still this is a fairly gritty, energetic rock / indie rock Brit pop album. Roll Up and Shine or Half the Lies You Tell Ain't True are quite aggressive rockers. Their famous single, The Bartender and the Thief, is a catchy one for rock festivals. Just Looking is one of those anthemic mid-tempo rock tracks that the Stereophonics were very good at least in their early years. But they also leave space for a bit moodier, pensive, slow ballads on this album, and the almost a bit Ringo Starr-like I Wouldn't Believe Your Radio, which is a fun little stomping ditty. This album and the accompanying singles were extremely successful in the UK and propelled the band into the spotlight also of more mainstream media and mainstream listeners. Stereophonics really were on the verge of becoming the new big thing in and from the UK, and this fact was underlined by their third album, which should become their, to date, I think, best-selling album. It came again with a bit of a maybe clumsy or unwieldy title, Just Enough Education to Perform, or abbreviated JEEP. This album came out in 2001 and showed the band in a bit of a mellower style. The songs here are slowed down. It all sounds a bit more laid back. There are more acoustic guitars, and everything happens more or less in the mid tempo to slow range. This came as maybe a bit of a disappointment of fans of the energy on the first two albums, but arguably this is their most concise or uniform collection of songs. The album opens with another sleazy rocker called Vegas 2 Times, which really sounds like something Aerosmith and Bad Company wrote together in the 70s and then somehow forgot the track. But the whole sound, also the lyrics, show that now the band really felt like rock stars and they had arrived in rock star status. So gone are the observations, the scenes of small town life that you could find on their debut album. Here the lyrics are about driving with a taxi through New York City, having fun in Las Vegas, or having a grudge with music critics on their song Mr. Writer, probably one of the best known songs from this album, but it's actually a very moody, plodding song. Kelly Jones also started in the liner notes to this album, and he would do so also on other albums, to meticulously note or write down in which hotel room he had written the lyrics to each song. So that feels like something very classic rock to some extent. But if I say classic rock, the songs and the sound of Stereophonics always remain rather economical. You won't get, flashy guitar solos or rock and roll bombast. Most of these songs are built around rather simple, straightforward chord progressions, little guitar licks. Sometimes you might even call these songs a little bit repetitive, but they are usually carried by Kelly Jones's very characteristic and unique voice. Step on My Old Size Nines of this album is an almost entirely acoustic, almost a bit country-influenced song, a style that the band would return to on later albums with more or less success. Have a Nice Day was a radio-friendly pop rock single. It's extremely infectious and catchy. And the more melancholic album tracks, such as, and I'm holding this album here in my hand to remember the tracks. Watch Them Fly Sundays, or the more dramatic but still mid-tempo closing track Rooftop, show a certain depth to this band. This one, and also their fourth album, You Gotta Go There to Come Back, which I believe even was a double album, can be considered the Stereophonics mid-tempo 70s rock phase. And maybe they could have hit it really big from here on, but things weren't all rosy within the band. There were frictions, even conflicts between Callie Jones, Richard Jones, and the drummer Stuart Cable, which finally led to the two guitarists sacking Cable. There were stories about Stuart Cable not showing up to rehearsals or being under-rehearsed. On the other hand, Stuart Cable sort of accused the other band members that they weren't committed enough and that the band, as he saw it, would never really progress or, advance, also technically. Obviously, some bitter feelings between the two camps in the lineup. Whatever the truth, Callie Jones and Richard Jones continued without the founding member Stuart Cable and returned in 2005 with their fifth album and a new drummer, Javier Whaler, I think is his name. This album also marked a stylistic change for the band. They still were kind of a number one act, at least in the UK, selling out huge arenas, and this also didn't change with this fifth album, which is my fourth entry on the Getting Into Stereophonics list. It's called Language, Sex, Violence, Other. The sound of this new lineup was a bit more polished. With this album, the band certainly tried to incorporate a more contemporary sound, a pop rock sound of the early 2000s. And this move seemed to work out fine for the band because the album features their first UK number one hit in the single Dakota. I mean, this is still a guitar-centered electric guitar rock album, and arguably the band hasn't rocked as hard as on tracks like Doorman or Brother ever since this album, but there are more effects used on the instruments. Oftentimes it's quite reverby, and there also are a bit of electronics in the production or synth pads going on in the background. And the overall sound is just a little bit more streamlined for a mainstream audience. Also, one can hear, or at least the album sounds as if there was a bigger production budget involved. And with songs like the aforementioned Dakota or Lolita, this album has a somewhat summery feel. So yeah, it's a nice, pleasant summer rock album. The album sold pretty well for the band, and I would say this is the point where the sort of second phase of the band's career set in. The songs, or the sound rather, got a bit more subdued, a bit more polished, as I've said, and rather turned into a kind of alternative mainstream pop rock sound. Not as gritty and as classic rock as their earlier albums. But the band went on to produce solid albums in steady intervals. In 2010, tragedy became part of the band history when Stuart Cable was found dead in his apartment, apparently after consuming way too much alcohol. This, of course, didn't leave the other core members of the band, the founding members, unaffected, but they continued on. In 2012, Jamie Morrison became the new drummer with the band, and I think he has stayed with Stereophonics until this day. In the following years, the band grew into a four-piece by also adding a second guitarist. And while their sound maybe has played it a bit safe ever since, and also sales maybe weren't as big anymore as with those first couple of albums. Stereophonics have remained a stable unit in UK rock or pop rock. And in order to represent that later phase of their career, I've chosen the album they released in 2017, which also marked the anniversary of their debut album. It's their 10th album called Scream Above the Sounds. Again, as is usual with Stereophonics albums, the title stems from a line in one of the songs on the albums. And this is a solid later Stereophonics indie pop rock album. The sound is smoother here, for example, on the single All in One Night, or the song What's All the Fuss About, that also comes with kind of gospel female background singers. Before Anyone Knew Your Name is a solemn piano ballad, and Would You Believe is built around a loop. And fans of the more rocking Stereophonics will probably enjoy Taking a Tumble or the song Chances Are. It's not exactly easy to stay relevant as a rock band these days, or to continuously reach an audience. So kudos to Stereophonics, who managed to stay active all these years, and as mentioned, they are still producing albums and touring, albeit at the moment with a really more acoustic, mellower sound. So the bite, the grit isn't really there anymore. But you can find out for yourselves via those 5 albums that I've just discussed. Of course, as always, I'm interested also to find out what 5 albums other Stereophonics fans would suggest for beginners as a primer. Thanks for watching. Maybe stick around for the next episode of Murdock's Music Minute, whatever that will be. Thanks, and see you again.